now. I can begin, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. We're called to order the meeting of the Budget and Finance Subcommittee of the City Council. It's comprised of Mayor Horvath and Mayor Pro Tem Meister. The City Manager, Paul Arevalo, has also joined us, as has our Assistant City Manager, David Wilson. And Christine Safri will be presenting the staff report at some point. I'm going to call roll now. Mayor Horvath.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Meister.
Here.
Okay, we are ready to begin.
Great, thank you, Melissa. I'm going to do just a few introductory remarks, and then I'm going to turn my camera off and put it on mute and watch the presentation. Normally, the tradition for the city is that we do a 2-year budget. We've done that for over a decade, probably close to 2 decades, where we've had a steady revenue stream, and we were able to do a little bit of a longer strategic plan for our budget. Clearly, during the time of COVID, with the economic shutdown, we've had significant impacts to our budget, far more than anyone would have anticipated, and you're going to see that later in the budget, that our deficit has grown a multiple of 3 to 4 times what we had anticipated. We're wrapping up as part of the mid-year to reconcile some of those revenue reductions. As we go into the next budget cycle, we will also do a pretty much status quo budget, trying to stay lean and mean in terms of our resources and in terms of programs. One of the big challenges we have, again, is just really going to be tracking the economic recovery. We should have a better handle on it within the next 12 to 18 months, but it is going to be a while for us to really be able to do a much better job forecasting our revenues. We still have the need to provide and to budget for critical services to our community, both to our residents and to our businesses. Obviously, the COVID programs that we've put in place to support residents is going to be critical. We will likely have to add additional resources to those programs over the next 12 months. We're also going to be facing testing and vaccine opportunities. We just want to make sure that we have monies available to address those challenges. From the business development efforts, our businesses continue to reel from the closures. We need to make sure that we're providing relief to businesses. The council's directed us to put together a grant program. We're going to be recommending some additional tax relief programs for our businesses. Also, we want to make sure that the marketing resources are in place for Visit West Hollywood, the Chamber of Commerce, and our 2 business districts, the Avenues of Art and Design and Sunset, are in place so that they can continue their strategic planning to anticipate what is needed for a grand reopening of our economy. Lastly, and this is just kind of a longer term issue, and it's something that I want to push out there, and I want to start having the conversation on it as soon as possible. Our reserves are taking a serious hit right now. The alternative is to drastically cut programs, and that would have impacts to service delivery and staffing. That is not recommended at this time. We've, over the last 20 to 30 years, have built up strong reserves to help weather a storm such as the one that we're in. The recommendation is, once the economy stabilizes, that those reserves get replenished over a short-term period, no more than 5 years. That'll be something we could look at doing. We have new hotels that are going to be coming online. We have the revenue coming in from the digital signs. We need to put together a strategic plan that allows for monies every year to be set aside to help rebuild the reserves that we're drawing down during this particular crisis. With that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Assistant City Manager David Wilson, unless there are questions from the committee. If not, I will hand this off to David Wilson, and I promise that I'm going to be here. I'm just going to turn my camera off, and I'm going to mute my mic. Thank you.
Great. So yes, I'm David Wilson. I'm the Assistant City Manager. We're going to try to keep the presentation brief so we spend more time with the subcommittee on discussion and any questions you may have. I will just give a brief recap of our fiscal year 2021 budget and some of the cost saving measures that we've taken. If you may recall that in May and June, we were working on the fiscal year 2021 budget, and it was still relatively early in the stages of the pandemic. We were projecting a 20% decline in general fund revenue to about $90 million. We implemented a number of cost-saving measures to reduce expenditures and balance the budget. Those included issuing bonds, postponing capital projects, canceling events, and travel, reducing non-essential contract services, and several personnel-related actions. Ultimately, we got the gap down to about $5 million, which we would draw down from reserves. At that time, we also knew that we'd be drawing down on reserves, emergency reserves, to provide vital assistance to our residents and business community members that are still in great need. To date, the City Council has approved $2.2 million in emergency funding this fiscal year. We have been reimbursed about $1 million of that from federal and local funding for all of our COVID-related expenditures. As we experienced the resurgence of COVID-19 cases in July, and then more severely in November and December, the state of California and LA County issued stricter requirements on businesses and revised their safer at home orders, which led to significant negative impacts on our business community, particularly the hotels and restaurants, but brick and mortar businesses overall suffered. So ultimately, that resulted in the May-June projected deficit of about $7.2 million, which, if you add the $5 million in reserves plus the $2.2 in emergency reserves, that grew to about $17 million. So now Christine Seyfried will provide a little deeper dive into our current budget and those numbers.
Thank you, David. My name is Christine Seyfried. I'm a senior management analyst and work on the budget. The pandemic-related restrictions on travel, business activity, and individuals impacted local.
Christine, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm looking at our agenda, and I don't know if we needed to follow the formal agenda, but there was a need for approval of the agenda, a pledge of allegiance, and offering opportunity for public comment at the beginning of the meeting. This is a new meeting that for the public, and a new way that we're doing this meeting for the public. So I sincerely apologize for interrupting, but I just need to make sure with our city clerk that we're following the appropriate protocol and that we're doing everything that needs to be done, since this is a publicly noticed meeting, before we continue with the agenda. I'm very sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're okay with skipping the agenda, or I'm sorry, the Pledge of Allegiance. I will ask if both you and Mayor Pro Tem Meister approve the agenda as presented. We didn't make any changes to it. So Mayor Pro Tem Meister, are you?
Aye.
Yes, okay. Mayor Horvath?
Yes.
Thank you. And I did notify staff that we have at least one member of the public who would like to speak. Mayor, would you prefer that we do that now, or would you like staff to continue with the presentation and then invite public comment?
Is it intended as general public comment, or is it intended as comment on this item that we're discussing?
The member of the public, Mr. Omolchenko, indicated that he would like to make public comments. He didn't specifically reference this item. So it probably would be more appropriate for him to provide comment now.
Okay, so let's do that first. and then we'll get back into the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Christine, I'm going to turn off the sharing, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Omolchenko to provide public comment. Victor, can you unmute yourself, and then you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mayor Horvath and Mayor Pro Tem Meister. What an important meeting this is. I remember sitting years ago when former City Council member John Heilman looked out at Jean Dobrin and then saw me, a relatively new person, and said at the end of the meeting, my goodness, there's only 2 people here and we're discussing probably the most important document that we discuss, the budget. At your last council meeting, I also realized that probably the second most important item is the legislative priorities. But getting back to this budget, I noticed that you mentioned that you had implemented a voluntary 1-year furlough program in which all regular employees took a 5 to 15% furlough depending on position level. As a former federal employee who went through several furloughs, that kind of situation, I'd like to hear what the cost savings have been in that area so far, and have there been any retirements as a result of this pandemic or of the offering of the early retirement program? I think those kinds of cost savings should be identified in the staff report. I was not able to see that. And the other thing I wanted to share with you is, yes, we've had to cancel Halloween Carnival. We've had to cancel Pride. We've had to cancel so many special events. But then it makes me wonder, what are our special event staff members doing? So at the last council meeting, I remember Mr. Rivas talking about the vacant properties program and how he relies on people to report to him that maybe there are not enough staff members to do that kind of code compliance that's so important to keep our vacant properties safe until they're redeveloped. So I just offer up, I mean, how have people been reassigned? I see that itemized in the agenda. Reassign staff as necessary after conferencing with the unions, and I know unions play a role in our city, but I'd like to hear more of a report on if we're not doing, for instance, a lot of special events, what are those people doing? Could they help out code compliance? What has actually been happening during this last year in terms of reassigning staff and in terms of cost savings so that our budget can be firm and secure as we go through this pandemic? And I want you also to be on the lookout for an email from me, and that's about a recent meeting that I just attended this afternoon of the Senior Advisory Board. And I really do feel, and I'm happy to have heard back from Mayor Pro Tem Meister about the need to have consistency across all commissions, boards, and city council meetings so that people of the public like me can call in and so that you can actually see our faces. If Weight Watchers, which I belong to, can do it with 200 people in a meeting, I think we can do it too. So thank you for working on behalf of a firm, solid budget for us during these very difficult times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Christine, you can begin your share again at this time if you would like.
Okay, give me just a moment.
And while Christine's pulling up the screen to continue her presentation, I want to first start off and apologize. This is the first time we're doing this in a public forum, at least that I've done it. I think I missed the last one. And yes, as the chair, normally the council members would kind of run the agenda, and I jumped in too soon, so I apologize for that. I'd like to just quickly respond to the speaker. We are, in terms of the furlough, we are realizing the budgeted savings from the furlough. These were real dollars and reductions to liabilities on our balance sheet, so it's a real budgeted savings. We have had a number of employees take advantage of the retirement incentive program. I'm not sure exactly how many, but at least a handful, maybe 2 handfuls of employees Lastly, whether it's special events or our lifeguards who no longer have a pool to work at, we have reprogrammed and redirected all of our staffing resources to hotspots, so everybody is fully engaged and is working at a high level. I appreciate those comments from Victor. I think he was right on point. These are things that we took into consideration immediately once we went to a remote work environment, and all of our employees are currently working at capacity. That's the answer to those questions. And at this point, I'm gonna, unless the council members have questions or comments, I'm gonna hand it back to Christine.
Thank you, Paul. So I will talk to you briefly about the city's current mid-year budget position. As you know, the pandemic-related restrictions have impacted the local and regional economies more severely than were initially projected during the development of the current budget. To summarize our position for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, which is July to December 2020, expenditures reached $50.7 million and have exceeded revenues of $34 million by a difference of $16.8 million. This is largely a result of revenue shortfalls compared to budget. The post-Thanksgiving resurgence of COVID-19 cases led to the issuance of a revised Safer at Home health order in December, which impacted West Hollywood. And as you know, this order required restaurants to cease in-person dining, place limitations on who hotels could offer rooms to, and restricted retail operations. As a result, city revenues were significantly negatively impacted. Hotel occupancies had climbed from single digits in March to about mid-30s in the summer, and they dropped back into the low teens and single-digit occupancies in November and December. They continued this month into the low teens. As a result, our hotel tax revenues are significantly lower than initially projected and that were approved in the FY21 budget cycle. Related revenues, including parking, parking meters, and business permits, have been similarly impacted. Combined, current projections for TOT and parking meters are $10.4 million lower than the original budget. Those are projections through the end of the year. Revenues in other categories are on track to reach budget projections, including property and sales tax and other revenues. Meanwhile, general fund expenditures reached approximately $51 million, or 53% of the budget in the first half of the fiscal year. Expenditures are on track to meet our budget projections. The major expenditure categories include wages and benefits, which reached 51% of the approved budget for the first half of the year, and public safety contracts, which reached 47% of the approved budget. As David mentioned, spending on emergency services, which has been allocated this year to date at $2.2 million. Those expenditures reached $1.6 million in actual spending so far to date. And those funds are being allocated as requests are approved. They do impact our general fund reserves. So to conclude, the city is currently projecting a year-end deficit of more than $17 million, and that's compared to our approved budget deficit of $4.8 million, an increase of over $12 million in drawdowns from reserves. David will take it from here to talk about a discussion of the budget and our next steps.
All right, thank you, Christine. I'm sorry, my computer's a little slow and I'm unmuting and turning on my video. So at the last council meeting, the council directed the city manager to evaluate various options regarding the waiver of city fees and assessments for businesses that have been impacted by the COVID-19 health orders. We did look at all the fees that are paid directly by businesses. The one fee that we would recommend reducing is the business tax certificate fees. That would provide the greatest impact to the most businesses. The other fees that we've looked at, or the other business fees, tend to they apply to certain types of businesses or businesses in certain areas, so it doesn't impact all the businesses. Our current budget for the business tax certificates is about $3 million. So if we were to do a 50% reduction, that would we'd need to lower our budget another $1.5 million. That would come from reserves, but businesses wouldn't pay half of their current business license tax. That fee is based on the 2020 calendar year, when many businesses didn't do very well anyway. So we expect those numbers to be lower than they normally would. But I think it still would have an impact for businesses and the widest range of businesses. The other things that were considered are listed here. I won't spend much detail on all of them, but the cannabis business tax fees, that's just one particular industry. And as you all know, on the subcommittee, we spent a lot of time recently entering an agreement with the cannabis businesses regarding those fees. So I don't think we want to go back and change that. Regulatory business fees is a fairly low dollar amount and only applies to certain businesses. And it's really for the city to monitor those businesses. So it's really for the code compliance work that is actually being done, and even more important right now. And the other fees, the parking credits and permit fees, again, it only applies to certain businesses. The business improvement district assessments are really just pass-throughs that go to the business improvement districts, the sunset bid and the design district. So that's not really the city's money. If we were to look at waiving those fees, it would require approval from the bids, and then they wouldn't have the money to do the much needed marketing that they need right now. Next slide, please. So just in fiscal restraint, Paul talked a little bit about this, so I won't go into any detail, but we will continue to be responsible fiscal stewards, and health and safety remain our top priorities. We will continue to work towards a balanced budget and long-term balance of the budget. Next slide. Use of reserves, as Christine talked about, we are drawing down on emergency reserves. At the December 21st meeting, we asked all of our social services providers to estimate what they need to continue their services through the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. And so that was approved at that time. That's included in the 2.2 million. We continue to monitor them. If there is additional funds that are needed, we would be coming back later in the year. But at this time, we've covered them through the end of June 30th. And if we do come back, it will be a drawdown of additional reserves. And then lastly, next slide. As far as planning for the future, as Paul talked about, we will do another one-year budget for fiscal year 2022 as we continue to hope that things return to normal sometime soon. We don't expect to have be back at our pre-COVID revenues at least until fiscal year 2023 or 2024. So the shorter budget periods help us to monitor the budget and provide more realistic budgets. But we will continue to look at our programming, provide programs and capital projects that are most important, but also defer things that we can until things return back to normal. And with that, I think that's the end of our slides. We are happy to take questions or hear discussion from you as the subcommittee, or well, Paul, if you have any final comments before we take additional comments.
No, I think this is a perfect transition, and I look forward to having a conversation with the council members.
Okay, very good. And just to confirm with our city clerk, I believe we don't have any speakers on this item. Is that right?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay, so I will start by turning it over to my colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Meister, so she can offer any initial comments or ask any questions. I'll follow her, and then we can engage in discussion from there if that works for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Mayor. So I thought that Victor's questions were really important, and I hope that for the council meeting when we discuss the budget, we can have, the real numbers to answer those questions. One of the questions I had when Victor brought up the furloughs is, what's happening with staff vacation time? Is that part of the furlough, or is the vacation? I mean, is that something that we can renegotiate with staff? Because obviously people aren't taking vacations. I mean, they're not going anywhere anyway. And I just wonder if that's something that we can work with to try to, cut some expenses. That's one question. If you want, I could just.
Do you want to? So with the voluntary furlough program that was agreed to with the bargaining units, what was actually agreed upon is that staff could use their accrued leave time, vacation time, administrative leave for their furlough hours. So those hours are being reduced during this time. So we originally projected about a $1.8 to $2 million that would be real money that's coming off the city's books based on the furlough program. And we are right on target for that. We are about at 1.8 million in a reduction in accrued leave from staff.
And even though people are working remotely, you'd be surprised that a lot of them are still taking time off, and they're taking vacation time off. And whether it's like working from home, doing a vacation from home, they are doing that. So it's, and it's also because we do have certain restrictions on accruals that force people to do that. So that is still happening. In terms of the retirements, David, do you have that number of how many people have taken the retirement incentive?
Yeah, so we had 4 people that took advantage of this round of the retirement incentive program. This was actually the second round we had. We also offered it last year in the fall, and there were 6 employees at that time. So now there's a total of 10 employees, and which also that has a larger cash out of their accrued leave when they leave. But we are seeing a significant savings because we haven't replaced those positions at this time as we continue to look at staffing overall.
Right. So I assume we're going to continue with our freeze through the next budget cycle. And I mean, I'm just wondering too, maybe, what other cities have done. I assume, I guess that Santa Monica has, laid off a number of people, and it's great that we haven't had to do that. But obviously, our biggest expense is wages. And so that's something, unfortunately, that's something that we may have to think about in terms of.
100%. Yeah, the short answer is that we're going to continue with the freezes. It's going to require some conversations with the bargaining units because it is a meet and confer. And it's a nuanced freeze as well. We've had other positions when we started this, and David could give the exact number. I think it was 20 vacant positions. We want to maintain the 20 vacant positions. Other positions have become vacant. So that'll be added to that pool. And there are some positions we may need to fill because they're critical positions. So overall, we're going to be maintaining a certain level of vacant positions consistent with the budget. But as one position becomes vacant, it may be an opportunity where we have to fill another essential position.
Okay. And what about, like, in terms of, say, the sheriff's department, because obviously that's one of our biggest contracts. Is there any additional savings? Because, we've seen a lot more reports of no significant incidences these last few months. And I don't know if they have some vacancies that maybe we can just say, you know what, don't fill them this year, or let's wait and see.
And we'll provide more information when we're doing the mid-year budget update. But the answer to that is yes. The biggest savings that we had was the cancellation of major events. And we need to have a conversation sooner rather than later about Halloween for 2021. Are we going to be ready for that? Should we be programming money for that? The sheriff's budget did have a number of vacant positions as well. They're having a hard time with some of their hiring, so those positions will continue to be vacant, and we'll maintain the leanest public safety budget we can. However, as we all saw, while there's no major incidents, there's still a lot of activity happening in the city, and the patrols, while they're not in the commercial districts, are now being redirected to the residential areas to deal with some of the other noise complaints. So the workflow is still there. But a lot of the philosophy and modeling that we did for this current year's budget, again, we'll provide more information at the council meeting in terms of the details. We will recommend continuing that as we move forward into the 2021-2022 budget.
Okay, and then I guess my last question for now is just, is there a way that we can expedite some of our revenue sources, such as, the billboard agreements, because obviously that'll be revenue for us, immediate revenue as well as revenue from their revenue. And I imagine like someone like Netflix will be making money this year. And,
Yeah,
it's as well.
No.
As well.
Yeah, totally agree. Brian Eck is the lead on that project. He's pedaling as fast as he can. I've inserted myself into those discussions as well to help facilitate the negotiations. So yes, the sooner we do those agreements, the sooner they get built, the sooner we'll recognize that new revenue. And that's going to be part of the also going to be part of that reserve rebuilding discussion, is percentages of these new revenues that have not been programmed into our budget in the past. Percentage of that should be carved off again before it gets allocated to the operating budget to replenish our reserves. So yes, 100%. We're treating that program almost like a separate enterprise fund where we're hyper-focused on it. We have a real strong team working to get those deals done, and it's a high priority.
Right, and cannabis as well. I guess February is the deadline for business license for the current winners. And so, I would suggest that also someone beyond that, like immediately.
Yeah.
I imagine that's still a very decent, will be a very decent revenue source for us, especially if people are out of work. They're going to be
yeah.
having some gummies.
Yeah,
Let's face it.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. For now, that's it.
Thank you very much. I want to thank our staff for working very hard to make sure that we have a budget that, first of all, can keep our city going in these difficult times. I know many businesses and others have found a lot of challenge and not been able to continue and had to make some pretty difficult choices. And so I just want to thank you for navigating us to this point and creating an opportunity for us to engage to make sure that we are prioritizing what we hear to be the priority issues of our community. In the past, we had heard, at the first couple of months that the top 3 issues that people were calling in about were really around transportation, housing and homelessness, and food security issues. I guess my first question is, are those still the top 3 inquiries that we're getting into City Hall in terms of support from our staff?
And specifically, I don't know if those are still the calls coming in, because we have allocated significant resources to those areas. Usually when there's a gap, that creates the echo effect, and then you hear, so we're not hearing about it. So, but at the same time, we continue to allocate monies to those areas, and the monies continue to be spent. David may be able to dig a little bit deeper into that, but it seems as though those continue to be major issues, and we put resources there, and the resources are spent. And when we need more monies in those particular areas, the council's willing to give us more resources. So this is just kind of a continuous operation.
Yeah, and I don't have anything to add. I would certainly echo that, in that those are services that we continue to provide, and they are being used. And so we haven't heard much more in greater need.
And we have another item coming back at the next meeting. So if there's any additional information, we'll provide it during that report.
That'd be great. I know that I continue to get contacted every month. Are we going to extend our rental assistance program? Are we continuing the expanded services through Project Angel Food to provide meals? So I think those services remain very critical. They're supporting some of our most vulnerable residents. And I want to make sure that we protect all of those social services that our people most at risk are really counting on. I know that we've done now in 2 meetings, a very comprehensive look at how we can help to support all aspects of our business community, from the very small mom and pop shops, all the way up to some of the bigger businesses that have really sustained some significant impacts. Based on what you are seeing in the horizon, I know that we are shifting to another 1-year budget cycle, which is understandable. We're in very uncertain times. Do you have a projection and recognizing the hit to our reserves that you're recommending that we sustain? When do you think we get back to some semblance of normal in terms of how our budget has operated in the past?
Yeah, I'm thinking that next year we can start having a longer term discussion. The economy is not going to recover for another 4 or 5 years. Hospitality is really big for us, and the whole hospitality market's going to change. That's kind of the Eeyore part of the conversation. But there's significant cash that people have not been spending, and it's just kind of burning a hole in their wallet. And I know that as soon as the economy opens up, and it opens up safely, that there's going to be pent-up demand, and West Hollywood is really an attractive place to come spend time and resources. But certain types of our economy, and I know we're going to be doing a series of studies on kind of the brick and mortar, studying, retail, hospitality. Some of what we've seen pre-pandemic, it's never coming back. This has been an accelerant to really close the door on certain businesses that have been kind of teetering to begin with. Some of the challenges we're going to have is going to be looking at our major revenue resources. And again, we're spending a lot of time and a lot of resources on kind of the smaller brick and mortar, and that's critical. Where I personally am spending my time is on the larger industries that really are the catalytic part of our economy. And it's a smaller group, it's a more boutique group, and making sure that our hotels get back online, because they're just so significant, not only to the city's revenue base, but they're also major feeders to all of our retail within the community. And the sooner people can get heads in beds, and I've always said this, people who come to West Hollywood, even though we have like the best and we have the newest and prettiest and funkiest hotels in the country, they're not coming here to sleep. I mean, they're coming here to visit our bars, visit our clubs and our pot shops, and eventually they're going to see the beautiful digital signs on Sunset with the art. These are things that it's just a big machine that we need to keep moving forward. So that's going to be really the concern, is working with Visit West Hollywood and Tom and his team to make sure they have everything they need to really relaunch, rebrand, and just kind of get a jump start on the LA creative hospitality environment, to make sure that our hotels are ready to rock and roll when we open the doors. And they're working on it now, and that's a major thing for us. We have 3 brand new hotels on Sunset. We have the Addition. We have the One Hotel, which is still a brand new hotel, and also the new the Pendry, which is a beautiful property. And these are going to be major assets and major attractions to the city of West Hollywood. We just need to make sure they have all the tools in place. The other businesses, they're going to continue to struggle. I think we're looking at creative ways, and David talked about the reduction to the business license tax. While we're looking at kind of surgical relief to some of the businesses. This is just kind of a blanket relief that everybody gets a little bit of a benefit from this program. And hopefully that's something that'll help some of these struggling businesses. And even the businesses that are doing well are still struggling. Just the cost of doing business right now is really difficult for our community. So a lot of the things we're putting in place are critical. Do I have a crystal ball when things get back to normal? I really don't. But I think by this time next year, and a lot of it's going to be the vaccine, the herd immunity, the public's response to that, and the comfort of coming back out, I think is going to be really high. I'm willing to bet if we were to open up the bars right now in West Hollywood, they would be filled to capacity, which is not necessarily a good thing because it's just not safe to do that. But I think once it is safe, that will be at capacity.
Unless you're giving vaccines while you're
exactly. Yeah, but those people who are going to the bars, they're too young to get the vaccines right now, so we have to wait.
Yes, we do have a very significant portion of our population under the age of 40. So we're all waiting for a very long time, it looks like. Another question I had from our last city council meeting, we talked about some of the properties that the city owns and what some of our intentions might be. And I know that we're engaging, a group to kind of help us brainstorm about that. Right. Typically, we've enjoyed the luxury of dreaming up all different kinds of things that we would like to see happening in our city and trying to be creative. Realistically, what do we think is actually possible for us in terms of activating, some of our properties and moving forward on some of those things? Are you recommending that some of those things can move forward, recognizing some of our urgent needs like housing, or are those things that we should be waiting a year on before we discuss?
So right now, my recommendation to the council and to the community is to hold back on new programs. Anything that adds to the operating budget, let's just defer that until we know what the operating budget looks like. In terms of our capital assets and capital campaigns, I think it's prudent to do planning aspects now. Those are not high dollar issues. Our properties are significant assets. They're going to bring significant value both economically and public benefit in terms of whether it's housing or other types of community resources. Anything that's on the capital side of the balance sheet, I would recommend that we continue to move forward. Those are the things that are going to be around for the next 30 years. And we're going to get a significant return on investment, whether it's a cash investment or just in terms of equity and service to the community. So I would not defer any of those items. I would move full steam ahead on those.
Okay.
And we have a significant balance on the bond proceeds that we issued. We issued $90 million in bonds last June. And we also have housing bonds and some of the former RDA bonds. So we have funds available for those projects without dipping into our reserves.
Okay. Well, I guess to dovetail on that, then sort of also acknowledging what the Mayor Pro Tem said, while some of our significant investments are in our staff, I think that's also an investment back into our community and the work that our staff does to provide services and support for people. So I just want to make sure, and part of that is, when our West Hollywood Park reopens, making sure that we have people to actually administer the programs that happen there. I think as people sort of look at the next, 18 to 24 months, accessing city resources and really taking advantage of what's already available in our community is going to be something that people do even more of. And so I just want to make sure, while I understand other cities may have made different choices, I want to make sure that we have the staff available to continue providing support to our most vulnerable and to administer the programs that people have come to count on in the community, that will get them through this difficult time, especially as we look forward to good news like our park reopening. So I just want to make sure we're prepared for all of that.
100%. And part of that may be, reprogramming people to help in those areas. It is going to be challenging to open a park during a pandemic. I mean, it's just nobody anticipated this, so that's one of the things that we're going to have to deal with. But clearly, it's going to be a beautiful facility. We want to make sure that the parts that we can open that are safe, that we definitely have the staffing in place to make it a functional building for everyone who comes to visit. And one of the things that I need to point out as well is, being with the city for 30 years and going through a lot of ups and downs within the organization, during this recent crisis, staffing at all level has really elevated their game in putting the city first. And whether it's the directors and managers, which I expect and kind of demand that out of them anyway, but all of the associations, the leadership of the associations, people just coming out of the woodwork and really stepping up and accepting new roles and new responsibilities that aren't in their job class, but just kind of understanding the crisis that we're in. I mean, it's been really an amazing journey, and I'm just really proud of all of the West Hollywood employees. Everyone at every level stepped up, and it's been spectacular.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, we got creative midway through to figure out how we could bridge the gap and keep people going at City Hall. Our staff stepped up and did a voluntary furlough that kept things going as well. And so I'm grateful for that. I think our community is grateful for that. And I hope that our budget is able to, prioritize the things that are most vulnerable, are really counting on. And I think in many cases that is our staff, not only to administer the programs, but also just for the role that they've been playing. I know there are many people who call and check in with our staff, and our staff has checked in with members of our community. I think that's part of the beautiful thing of being in a community like West Hollywood, is that personal touch. Mayor Pro Tem, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. So I think I guess I have two more comments. One is, Paul, so basically based on what we've heard, we will be in a position the next year or two, even if we have to draw down, $15 million a year for the next few years. I mean, based on your projections, we have that money in our reserves to be able to do that. Obviously, we want to replenish as soon as possible, but we do have that money now.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things I want to be clear on is the things we need to do, we can do. There's things that we want to do and that we may want to do in the future that just may need to stay on the back burner.
And then, thank you. And then my last comment or question is, so, and the mayor brought this up regarding our properties. Moving ahead, and we're going to get that consultant to look at the properties and see what the best uses are for those properties. But obviously that's not going to happen overnight. And even once we have that information, nothing happens overnight. So I'm just wondering, are there any properties that we have that we can use for some temporary use to help generate some revenue for the city, or help out some of our small businesses? So for example, like the Spalding surface parking lot, maybe that's an area where a restaurant can utilize it to do some outdoor dining and pay us, rent or not, whatever we decide. But, that will help, revenue, which helps all of us anyway, right? So, and maybe the one on Sunset. So I'm just thinking maybe some of our surface parking lots, there's a higher and better use than surface parking lot, just temporarily while we're working on other things.
The short answer is yes. And in terms of like the outdoor dining, Tara and Paulo reached out to a lot of businesses to see if there was interest in it, and there really wasn't. But we continue to explore opportunities while we're kind of in this limbo period. But in regards of making money off of our surface or our property right now, if you look at the Spectacular on Sunset, that's going to be a major economic boost in our arm once that goes up. So yes, what you're saying is what you told us to do 5 years ago, and we're still doing it. And I think as we look at other opportunities kind of in the short term, definitely to look at that, and we'll continue to explore those opportunities.
Because maybe if there's, for example, an underutilized surface parking lot, maybe it can be, used as, I know we're going to have an item coming to us about outdoor training, so it seems to me there might be some better use opportunities, temporary use, but.
I'm gonna be a little flip here. Is we're good at giving stuff away. We're not good at recovering the money. We're going to spend a couple $100,000 on the out zones. We're not renting those to the businesses. If we open up our parking lots to gyms, which isn't a bad idea, we're not going to get any money from it. So while it may be good for the economy, it's not going to be good to our bottom line. But I hear what you're saying. And anything that's surplus, anything that helps businesses and helps, West Hollywood's economic engine keep running, definitely.
So I think as far as, this is our initial meeting to kind of see what, where we're at. I think we'll probably get a more detailed look at how the budget will shape up moving towards June. I think you've heard some of our initial comments and areas of priority to focus on. I think we've been talking about them all this year, during COVID, making sure that we're protecting our most vulnerable and continuing those programs that people are counting on, while doing what we can creatively and responsibly to support our business community and make sure that there are businesses for workers to return to and jobs that will get everybody back going. Can you help walk us through at this point what further direction you need from us? I know you had mentioned wanting to talk about Halloween and also what the timeline looks like moving forward for us to continue this conversation.
Yeah, I think we have enough information and feedback from you to accomplish today's goal, which is to get feedback for the staff report on mid-year. So we're going to be coming back with mid-year, and then we'll receive questions and comments from the other council members as well. In terms of longer range, we'll have that discussion moving forward. So this is the first meeting for the mid-year budget, and we're going to have at least one more of these for the full budget, and we'll do a better job letting you know that you need to run the meeting. So I apologize for that. Another issue too, and something that's going to come before council sooner rather than later is, should we be having discussions about a large scale event in the fall? We have two competing events. They're not necessarily competing with each other. We did get word that the LA Marathon would like to transfer or to change the date to a fall marathon. So they're looking at likely November, early December. And that's a completely different type of large scale event than Halloween. Halloween is no social distancing. It's a crowded environment. And while the vaccine may be out, my recommendation at this time, and I'm not Dr. Fauci, is that we take another year off on Halloween. I just don't think that we're going to be ready. We can hope that we're ready in September and October with the vaccinations, but there's so much money that needs to be allocated to that event, and to plan an event when there's still a chance that we have not reached herd immunity. I think at some point that the council should have a discussion about pulling the plug on Halloween 2021.
Yeah, well, I think we should have that conversation as a council for sure, whether that's part of your next recommendation or a conversation we need to have before your next recommendation comes to us, just so we can, responsibly think about some of those things, whether it's, through the end of calendar year 2021 or not. But I think people are, certainly have expectations about those things. We've canceled our large scale events through the end of June, depending on what continued vaccination rollout looks like. I think, we have to consider all of our possibilities.
And in regards to the vaccination rollout and testing, there may be opportunities that arise that we could participate and help support that. And that goes back to, while I'm not looking for ways to spend more money, because we're in a economic crisis at the city as well. Those are areas that we need to be ready to participate if the opportunities arise. And we are having conversations with the county on those. So we will keep the city council posted.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any additional comments?
Not really, just if we need to have the conversation about Halloween sooner rather than later so that we don't, put any resources into it that become unnecessary, I think we should do that.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Okay. I know for those who are agenda hawks, I want to make sure people know that we intentionally did not approve the minutes. They were not part of our packet to review, so we couldn't review them in advance of this meeting. So our city clerk is going to work with our city attorney to address those and bring them back at our next meeting. It seems like there are no additional comments from our subcommittee. We did not need to take action on the unfinished business item outside of the direction that we provided. Do we have any additional comments from staff? All right. Well, with 1 minute to spare, I get to go sign on to the other meeting that I had to go run and get a proclamation for at City Hall. So this has been a very productive hour with you all. Thank you for all of the work that you've done. And we look forward to seeing what comes of our discussion in the next form of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. We're adjourned.